The hall was adorned with thousands of white roses, chandeliers dripped golden light upon polished marble floors, and every guest who had arrived whispered about the fairy tale love between Jonathan Hayes, the young millionaire who had risen from nothing to build an empire, and Amelia Carter, the woman whose heart had been wrapped around his promises of forever. The air was thick with anticipation, the orchestra playing softly, cameras flashing, and Amelia stood there in a gown so beautiful it made her seem like she had stepped out of a dream, her veil glistening like morning dew, her eyes filled with both excitement and nervousness because today was supposed to be the day her life changed forever, the day when love triumphed over everything. But as the clock ticked, as the silence inside the church grew heavier, a strange unease began to ripple through the guests. At first it was nothing more than a small delay, the sort of thing people brushed off with polite chuckles, but as the minutes turned into half an hour, as Amelia's father shifted uncomfortably and her mother avoided her eyes, as whispers turned into murmurs and murmurs into sharp gasps, the truth began to claw its way to the surface: Jonathan Hayes was not coming. She stood frozen at the altar, bouquet trembling in her hands, her lips whispering silent prayers that maybe, just maybe, he had been caught in traffic, that maybe he was outside explaining something to his best man, that maybe there was a reason that would undo this growing horror, but the truth landed like a blade straight into her chest when the wedding coordinator approached with pale cheeks and shaking hands, murmuring, "He's gone, Amelia. We can't reach him." In that instant, the world tilted, her lungs locked, her knees threatened to buckle, but pride kept her standing because she would not allow strangers to watch her collapse, she would not allow gossip to break her outward composure even as her heart bled inside. She turned without a word, dragging the long train of her gown down the aisle as cameras clicked, as whispers exploded into scandal, and though her back was straight and her chin was lifted, every step felt like walking on shattered glass. By the next morning, newspapers screamed the headlines: "Millionaire Groom abandons bride at the altar." "Jonathan Hayes vanishes on wedding day." Social media devoured her humiliation, strangers turned her heartbreak into entertainment, and Amelia could not breathe beneath the suffocating weight of it all. She packed her bags that night, left the city with only silence as her companion, and swore never to let his betrayal define her life again. The years that followed were brutal. She worked small jobs in towns where no one knew her name, fought off the whispers that echoed in her mind, and each night she asked herself the same unanswered question: why? Why had Jonathan left her? Why had he destroyed everything they had built? Why had he let her drown in shame without even a single explanation? But as the months rolled into years, pain transformed into determination, heartbreak forged her into steel, and Amelia discovered that she did not need a millionaire's hand to rise, she had her own fire. She studied business in the quiet hours after long shifts, sketched clothing designs in worn notebooks, and slowly started a small boutique with nothing but borrowed money and relentless willpower. People noticed, women admired her resilience, and word spread of the young woman who had once been abandoned but now created garments that made others feel strong, beautiful, unstoppable. Amelia built not just a business but an identity, and with each success, she shed the shadows of the past. Still, late at night, when the lights went off and the world grew quiet, the memory of that altar returned, the cold marble beneath her feet, the sting of whispers in her ears, the sight of an empty aisle where her groom should have been, and though she told herself she no longer cared, her heart still carried the scar of a love that had betrayed her most deeply. But destiny has its way of circling back, and though Amelia did not know it yet, the man who had destroyed her once was about to collide with her life again, and this time, the story would not unfold the way it had before. Years had passed since that day, and Amelia had transformed from the broken-hearted bride who had been left at the altar into a woman whose name carried weight in the fashion world, her clothing brand known for elegance and resilience, her story whispered among women as a testament to survival and strength. She walked into boardrooms with unshakable confidence, commanded respect from investors, and carried herself like a queen forged from ashes, yet the wound of Jonathan Hayes remained tucked deep within her soul, hidden beneath layers of success. She had convinced herself she would never see him again, that their lives had diverged permanently, but fate is rarely so merciful, and one crisp autumn evening as she arrived at a gala hosted by a leading business association, she froze in her tracks because across the room, beneath the same chandeliers that once had witnessed her humiliation, stood Jonathan. He looked older, sharper, the years etched into his handsome face, his tailored suit whispering of power, but his eyes searched the crowd until they landed on her, widening with shock and something that looked very much like regret. Amelia's heart raced, but she steadied her breath, refusing to allow even a flicker of vulnerability to surface, because she was no longer the girl who had once waited for him at an altar, she was the woman who had built her empire from ruins. The room seemed to quiet around them as Jonathan approached slowly, his lips parting as if searching for the words that had been buried for years. "Amelia." He breathed, his voice thick with emotion, but she raised her chin and replied coolly, "Mr. Hayes," her tone distant, formal, as though addressing a stranger. The crowd around them melted into chatter and clinking glasses, but for them, the world had shrunk into a battlefield of unspoken words and memories that clawed at both of them. Jonathan's hand trembled slightly as he tried to explain, to speak of the storm that had consumed him on their wedding day, of secrets he had been forced to hide, of a truth that had chained his choices, but Amelia cut him short, her voice steady though her chest burned with old pain. "You left me in front of the world, Jonathan. You made me believe I was not enough. Tell me, what explanation could ever erase that?" His eyes darkened, filled with torment, and he whispered that he had been threatened, that powerful enemies had vowed to destroy Amelia's life if he married her, that walking away had been the only way he believed he could protect her. The confession struck her like lightning. Half of her wanted to scream at him for not trusting her strength, for not fighting beside her, while another half of her ached because somewhere beneath all the scars, her heart still beat at the sound of his voice. But Amelia was not a woman to fall easily anymore. She crossed her arms and told him, "You had a choice. And you chose silence over me." Jonathan's jaw tightened, regret pouring from him, but determination too, as he vowed he would not lose her again, that he had returned not just to confess but to prove himself worthy. Amelia turned away, refusing to let him see the tears burning in her eyes, but destiny was not finished with them. The days after the gala, Jonathan began to appear in places connected to her world, not intruding but offering help, investing in her projects anonymously, protecting her business from rivals who had long envied her success, and every time Amelia discovered his quiet interventions, her carefully built walls began to tremble. She hated him for the years he had stolen, yet she could not deny that his presence reignited a fire she thought long extinguished. One evening, when a competitor attempted to sabotage her brand launch, it was Jonathan who stepped in publicly, defending her with the full weight of his influence, declaring in front of the press that Amelia Carter was a woman the world had underestimated for far too long. The cameras captured her stunned expression, the crowd erupted with applause, and suddenly the scandal of her abandonment years ago began to transform into a story of redemption, resilience, and rekindled fate. Alone that night, Jonathan finally found her in the quiet of her office, where sketches and fabrics lay scattered across her desk, and with raw honesty, he dropped to his knees, not as a millionaire, not as a man of power, but as the broken soul who had once failed her, begging not for forgiveness but for a chance to prove his love. Amelia's heart thundered. She had every reason to walk away, every reason to remind him that she had rebuilt her life without him, but the tears in his eyes, the trembling sincerity in his voice, shattered the chains of her bitterness. She realized that though he had made the worst mistake of her life, his love had never been a lie, and her heart, scarred but alive, still carried his name. When she finally extended her hand, helping him to his feet, it was not an act of weakness but of power, because Amelia had grown beyond the girl he once knew, she was now his equal, his strength, his redemption. And as the city lights glowed behind them, as Jonathan whispered that he would spend every breath proving his devotion, Amelia smiled faintly and whispered, "This time, Jonathan, don't you dare let me walk alone." The world outside would soon tell the tale not of an abandoned bride, but of a love story resurrected from the ashes, stronger than betrayal, brighter than scandal, and more enduring than time itself.